Overlord Volume 5 Chapter 4 Congregated Men Part 1 Lower Fire Month, 9th month, 3rd day 401. Brain's accumulated fatigue hit him all at once, and so he slept for almost a full day upon entering Gazef's home. He woke up to eat a little, and then went right back to bed. He did not wish to admit it, but he could rest easy in Gazef's home because he felt safe there. He knew that even his rival Gazef could not endure a single blow from that Shaltir, yet the home of his former nemesis was now the safest place in the world for him. It relieved his tension and allowed him to sleep soundly. Light fell across Brain's face through the slats of the louved window. The light woke Brain from his dreamless sleep. He opened his eyes, but the piercing rays made him squint them again. He reached his hand out to block the sunlight. Brain propped himself up on one arm, and then swung his legs over so he was sitting on the side of the bed. He looked around the room like a frightened mouse. The plain room only had the bare minimum of furniture in it, and Brain's war gear was piled up in a corner of the room. Is this the room which the kingdom's warrior captain uses to receive guests? As Brain looked around the empty room, he let a few biting words fall from his lips as the lack of people put him at ease. Then, he stretched himself, and his joints made cracking noises as his stiff body relaxed, and the blood circulated through his body once more. A huge yawn escaped him. He must have let his people stay the night here in the past, no? They must have felt so disappointed. The reason why royalty and nobility led such luxurious lives was not simply because they enjoyed it. It was also for vanity's sake, to protect their image. Similarly, when the men saw their leader's opulent lifestyle, it would spur their desire to make a name for themselves and give them motivation. No, it's not my place to say such things, Brain mumbled. Then he snorted, but it was directed at himself and not Gazef. It must have been because he had been pulled back from the brink of madness, the place where he had nearly been driven by those twin mental shocks. To think he would actually be thinking about such trivial matters. As Brain thought about that powerful monster, he found that he could not stop the tremors in his hand. As I thought, the terror which clung to his heart had not been removed yet. Shaltir blood fallen. A figure of absolute power, one whom even Brain, who had abandoned everything else in pursuit of sword skills, could not possibly match. She was a monster among monsters, yet one whose looks were the sum total of all the beauty in the world. She was a person who wielded true power. A thrill of fear shot through his heart at the mere memory of her. He had lived in constant terror of that monster's pursuit, and once he had reached the road to the royal capital he had not slept or even rested, only fleeing for his life. The specter of Shaltir appeared before him when he did sleep, and the night seemed to take her shape as he ran along the roads. Crushed under this disquiet, he had not been able to get a good night's rest. All he could do was run like there was nothing else in the world for him. He had chosen to flee to the royal capital, because he believed that he could lose himself among the masses of people there, and throw her off his trail. However, he had not expected the heavy toll which his grueling flight had taken on him, or the lack of self-preservation which had developed as a result. Meeting Gazef was an unexpected development. Perhaps Brain imagined that Gazef could eliminate Shaltir, and so his legs had unconsciously brought him in search of his rival. Yet, he had not found his answer. What should I do now? He had nothing. He opened his hands, and they were empty. He looked at his war gear in the corner of the room. He had obtained a katana in order to triumph over Gazef. Yet, what would he do after beating Gazef? He now knew that there was a being several orders of magnitude more powerful than himself. If he could not defeat said being, what was the point of triumphing over those who were beneath it? I should probably go take up the plow instead, it would probably be more meaningful. Then, Brain sensed someone outside just as he was about to mock himself. Unglaus, are you awake? You should be, right? That voice belonged to the owner of this home. Ah, Stronov. I'm up. The door opened and Gazef entered the room. He was fully outfitted in his battle panoply. You sure slept for a long time. I was shocked by how deeply you were sleeping. Yeah, thanks for letting me be. Sorry about that. Don't worry about it. However, I need to head out to the palace right now. Tell me about what happened after I come back. It's pretty bad, you know? You might end up like me. Even so, I have to listen. I guess it ought to be better if we drank while we talked to lighten the mood. Treat this place as your home until I get back. Ask the household help if you want to eat anything. They ought to be able to throw something together for you. And if you want to head out, you've got money, right? No. But, if I need anything, I can sell my magic items. Brain showed Gazef the rings he was wearing. Is that really okay? They're not cheap, right? It's fine. I don't care. He had bought these items to defeat Gazef. Now that he knew there was no point in doing so, what meaning was there in treasuring these trinkets? High-priced items can be hard to sell at times. The buyer does need to raise the money, after all. Here, take this. Gazef tossed him a small cloth pouch. Brain caught it, and heard the sound of metal clinking from inside. Sorry about this. I'll be borrowing this for now, then. Part 2 Lower Fire Month, 9th month, 3rd day 10:31. Sebas strolled leisurely as he pondered how to deal with the 5 people who had been following him ever since he had left his home. He believed that moving his body would lift his mood and help him think of a good idea. Soon, he saw a crowd of people jamming up the road in front of him. The sound coming from them was either vicious cursing or mocking laughter, accompanied by the sound of something striking something else. Cries along the lines of someone's going to die, and better get the guards rose up from them. The crowd blocked his line of sight, but he was certain that some kind of violence was in progress. Sebas thought that perhaps he should change his path, and take another path. He hesitated for a moment, and then he continued straight onwards. His path took him into the center of the crowd. Excuse me. Sebas wove through the onlookers with those words and reached the center of the crowd. The sight of an old man moving with a bizarre, fluid grace shocked and unnerved the onlookers, and the people who saw Sebas passing before them were stunned with surprise. There seemed to be someone else trying to get to the heart of the crowd other than Sebas. Said person went, "Excuse me," but he could not advance through the throng of humanity, and was stuck, unable to advance or retreat. Sebas stepped into the center of the congregation with no difficulty, and there he saw what was going on with his own eyes. Several unkempt-looking men were kicking and stomping on something. Sebas moved on without a single sound, stopping only when he was within arm's reach of the men. "Fuck you doing, old man?" One of the 5 men had noticed Sebas approaching and snarled at him. "This place seemed a little noisy, so I came to take a look. You want a piece of this?" The men ran over to surround Sebas. As they left their original positions, they revealed the object they had been kicking around all this time. It looked like a boy. He was curled up on the ground and bleeding from his face. It was unclear if the blood came from his mouth or his nose. Apparently the boy had passed out after being brutalized for so long, but he still looked like he was breathing. Sebas looked at the men. The smell of alcohol hung about their mouths and bodies. Their faces were flushed red, but not from the exertion of physical activity. Had they lost control of their violent impulses because they were drunk? Sebas had a blank expression on his face as he asked, "I don't know why you're doing this, but don't you think it's time to stop?" "Huh? This punk got his food all over my shirt. How could I let that slide?" One of the men pointed to a spot on his shirt. It did look like a stain. However, the men's clothes were filthy to begin with. That being the case, the stain was hardly obvious. Sebas looked at the one who seemed to be the boss of the 5 young men. The difference might have been too subtle for an ordinary human being to detect, but Sebas, who had a warrior's keen sensory perceptions, was able to pick him out. Still, public safety in this city is quite bad. Sebas spoke as though he had just confirmed something he had observed from afar. The men thought he had trivialized them, and made noises of displeasure. "Begone." "The fuck you say, old man?" "I'll say it again, begone. Damn geezer." The boss-like man flushed red and clenched his fist, and then he collapsed limply to the ground. Sounds of shock came from all around them, including the 4 remaining men. What Sebas had done was simple enough. He had simply formed his hand into a fist and struck a blow at the man's chin, albeit at a speed which humans would be hard-pressed to even see. That had given the man a high-speed brain concussion. He could also have sent the man flying with imperceptible speed, but that would not have served to frighten the others. Thus, he had held back in his strike. "Do you still wish to fight?" Sebas quietly said. His calm and strength cut through the men's intoxication. They backed several steps off and chorused an apology. Sebas thought, "You're apologizing to the wrong person," but he did not actually say it. The men grabbed their unconscious colleague and fled. Sebas did not bother watching them and instead went over to the fallen boy. However, he stopped in his tracks halfway. What was he doing? Right now, he ought to be dealing with the problem he was facing. Only a fool would go and take more problems onto himself at a time like this. Had he not ended up in this precarious state, because he was too sympathetic and acted without thinking? In any case, the boy had been saved. He would have to be satisfied with that. That thought crossed Sebas' mind, but he still headed toward the boy. He touched the immobile boy's back and infused a bit of ki into him. Channeling the full measure of his ki would probably heal all his wounds immediately, but that would be far too eye-catching. Thus, Sebas did the bare minimum necessary, and then he pointed to someone who happened to meet his eyes. "Please take this boy to the temple. His ribs might be broken, so please take care when loading him onto a board for transport, and don't shake him too much." The man Sebas had ordered nodded, and then Sebas strode forth. He did not need to push to the crowd, because they cleared out of his way when he took a step forward. Sebas continued ahead once more. Before long he sensed that the number of presences following him had increased. However, there was one problem, namely, the identity of his tails. The 5 people who had followed him from the house were most likely Succulent's men. In that case, what about the 2 who had joined them in stalking him after he had saved the boy? They seemed to be grown men by the sound of their footsteps and their pace, but he had no idea who they were. "I can't think of an answer. In any case, I should probably apprehend them first." Sebas turned a corner into a dimly lit region. His followers remained on his trail. Still, are they really hiding themselves? They had not concealed the sounds of their footsteps. Did they lack the ability to do so, or was there some other reason? He decided not to think over much on the matter. After all, he could verify the truth after capturing them. Sebas decided to make his move once he could no longer sense the presence of others around them. Just then, a hoarse, but youthful, male voice came from one of the people who had been following him. "Excuse me. Part 3 Lower Fire Month, 9th month, 3rd day 1027 Climb, was thinking on his way back to the royal palace. He thought about the battle he had fought with Gazef that morning, replaying the fight in his mind over and over again, and considering how to fight with greater skill. "What tactics will I try if I get another chance?" he thought. Just as Climb slowly reached his conclusion, he saw a group of people huddled up in front of him. Angry cries came from them, and 2 guards watched from afar, unsure of what to do. The sounds of an argument came from the center of group, and it did not sound like an ordinary squabble. Climb's expression turned cold, and he walked up beside the guards. "What are you doing?" The guard jumped in fright, given that someone had called out to him from behind, and he turned to look at Climb. The man wore a chain shirt and carried a spear. He wore a surcoat emblazoned with the kingdom's crest on top of the chain shirt. This was the standard uniform of the average guard in the kingdom, but Climb could sense that neither of the people in front of him was well trained. To begin with, neither of them had honed physiques. For that matter, they were also unshaven, and their chain shirts had not been polished. A faint air of grime hung about them, and they seemed quite slovenly in overall appearance. "You are." Climb was younger than himself, so the guard responded to him with a tone that was a mix of bafflement and annoyance. "I'm off duty at the moment." Confusion spread across the guard's face as he heard Climb's staunchly insistent voice. Perhaps it was because he radiated an aura of superiority despite being younger than them. The guards seemed to have concluded that they could not go wrong by taking a submissive posture, and they straightened up. Seems to be a civilian disturbance. Climb resisted the urge to castigate them by saying, I knew that already. Unlike the palace guards, the guards who patrolled the city were drawn from the civilian populace, and were not well trained. In truth, they were merely civilians who knew how to use weapons. Climb turned his eyes from the nervous guards to the crowd. It would be quicker to settle the matter in person than wait for them to do anything. While poking his nose into guard business might be considered an overstepping of his authority, he would not be able to face his beloved mistress if he simply stood by while a citizen was being ill-treated. You wait here. Without waiting for their reply, Climb firmed up his resolve and pushed into the crowd, forcefully thrusting his body in. While there were spaces between each person, he was unable to get through the through. No, it would not be normal for anyone to be able to do it. He was nearly shoved back out, but he struggled to shove his way forward. This was when he heard a voice from the center of the crowd. Begone. Ah. The fuck you say, old man? I'll say it again, begone. Damn geezer. This was bad. Those thugs were not satisfied with the beating they had administered. Now they wanted to strike an old man as well. Climb's face flushed red as he desperately shoved his way forward, and when he got through the crowd, he saw the figure of an old man before him. He was surrounded by a group of younger men. At their feet was a boy who had been beaten so badly he looked like a crumpled rag. The old man was elegantly dressed, and gave off the feeling of being nobility, or the servant of nobility. The men surrounding him were muscular, and looked drunk. The villainous side was apparent at a glance. One of the men, the one who looked the most muscular, clenched his fist. Compared to him, the old man seemed far inferior, be it in the sturdiness of their bodies, the bulging of their muscles, or their bloodthirsty brutality. Surely the younger man could easily send the old man flying with but a swing of his fist. The people around them realized this, and gasped in horror at the tragedy, which was about to befall the old man. Amidst all this, only Climb felt that something was strange. Indeed, the younger man looked stronger. Yet, Climb could sense an aura of absolute power coming from the old man. He froze for a moment, and lost his chance to curb the younger man's violence. The man raised his fist, and then he collapsed limply to the ground. The people around Climb exclaimed in shock. It would seem that the old man had made a fist and struck the other man square on his chin, at incredible speed. Even Climb's honed vision could barely keep up with the swiftness of that blow. Do you still wish to fight? The old man directed this calm and grave question at the remaining men. The combination of his inscrutable exterior and his calm tone broke through the men's drunkenness. No, even the people around them had been frightened by his presence. The men had lost all will to fight. We're sorry. The men backed up and chorused an apology, and then they grabbed their colleague, who had been disgracefully laid out on the ground, and fled with their tails between their legs. Climb did not think about following those men. After all, the old man's ramrod straight posture, with his chest upthrust, had stolen his heart, and left him frozen in place. He looked like a masterwork blade. It was a sight that would fill any warrior who saw it with reverence. Small wonder that he could not move. The old man patted the fallen boy's back, as though examining his wounds, and then he ordered a passerby to get the boy to treatment before striding off. The crowd cleared a path for the old man to walk. Everyone's eyes were fixed on his back, such was the allure of the old man's presence. Climb hurried over to the fallen boy, and then took out the potion Gazef had given him after their training session. Can you drink this? There was no answer. He had fainted dead away. Sim opened the bottle and poured the liquid on the boy's body. Many people believed that potions had to be drunk, but the fact was that it would work even when splashed on the flesh. Magic was truly great. The boy's skin seemed to absorb the liquid as it disappeared into his body, and the color returned to the boy's face. Climb nodded in relief. As the crowd realized Climb had just used an expensive item like that potion, they were every bit as awed by him as they were by the old man's preternatural skill. Climb did not regret using the potion. Having taken the people's taxes, it was only natural that he, as one who lived on said taxes, should protect them and maintain public order. He felt that he ought to be able to do that much, even if he could not defend the people. The boy ought to be all right now that Climb had given him the potion, but it would be best for him to go to the temple just to be safe. He looked to the guards standing by and noticed that the pair had become a trio. Apparently someone had arrived late. The crowd had been tossing critical glances at the guards ever since just now. Climb addressed a very uncomfortable-looking guard. "Take this boy to the temple." "What happened to him?" "Someone assaulted him." "I've already used a healing potion on him so he should be all right, but I hope you'll take him to the temple for a checkup, for safety's sake." "Yes." "Understood." After handing the cleanup to the guards, Climb concluded that there was nothing left for him to do here. As a soldier assigned to the palace, it would be better not to interfere in the matters of other places. "Can I trouble you to question any eyewitnesses about the details of what happened here?" "Understood. Then I'll leave the rest to you." Climb noted that the guards seemed to have gained confidence, and moved more quickly upon receiving their orders. He ran ahead without another word. "Where are you going?" one of the guards called, but Climb ignored him. He only slowed down when he reached the corner which the old man had taken. After that, he began trailing the old man. Soon, he saw the old man walking along the street. He wanted to call out to him, but he could not work up the courage to do so. That was because he sensed an invisible wall between them, a sense of awesome power that seemed to crush him. The old man turned a corner and headed into a darker region. Climb followed. He was walking behind the old man, yet he did not dare speak up and address him. Was Climb not stalking him? Climb began to feel annoyed by what he was doing. Even if he did not know how to approach the old man, he could not keep following him like this. In an effort to change the situation, Climb continued following in silence. Once they had entered an empty back alley, Climb took several deep breaths, as though he were a boy psyching himself up to confess his love to a girl. Then he summoned his courage and said, "Excuse me." The old man turned around after hearing someone call out to him. His hair was white, as was his beard. However, his back was straight, like a fine blade forged of steel. His handsome face was wrinkled, giving a kindly cast to his features, but his eyes were keen, and as focused on their prey as those of an eagle's. He even had an air of nobility about him. "Is something the matter?" The old man's voice sounded somewhat aged, but it overflowed with an undeniable vitality. Climb felt an invisible pressure rolling out towards him, and he gulped. Climb could not speak, overwhelmed as he was by the man's presence. As he saw this, the old man appeared to relax, and let the tension escape from his body. "And who might you be?" His tone was gentle. Released from the immense, crushing strain, Climb's throat regained its ability to function. "My name is Climb, and I am a humble soldier of this nation. Thank you for your courageous action in completing a task that should have been rightfully mine." Climb bowed deeply in thanks. The old man fell into thought, then narrowed his eyes. After that, he quietly went as he realized what Climb meant. "It's fine. Then, I'll be going." The old man broke off the conversation, and made to leave, but Climb then raised his head and asked, "Please wait. Actually, well, this is somewhat embarrassing, but I've been following you for a while because I have a request to make of you. I know I might sound like I'm trying to bite off more than I can chew, and you are free to laugh at me, but if you don't mind, could you teach me your technique from just now?" "What do you mean by that?" "I have been studying the martial arts for a long time, and I would like to improve my skills further. After I saw that impeccable movement of yours just now, I was hoping that you could teach me a little of your technique, if it pleases you." The old man sized up Climb. Show me your hands." Climb extended his hands, and the old man carefully examined his palms. It made Climb feel a little awkward. The old man turned his hands over, glanced at his nails, and nodded in satisfaction. Thick and hard. These are truly a warrior's hands. Climb's chest heated up as he heard the other man praise him. The joy in his heart was much like how he had felt when Gazef had offered his own words of praise. No, someone like me is barely hanging on to the title of warrior. I don't think you need to be so humble. May I see your sword next? The old man accepted the sword and inspected the handle. Then he turned his keen gaze on the sword's blade. I see, is this a backup weapon? How did you know? As I thought. Look, do you see this dent here? Climb looked at where the old man was pointing. Sure enough, part of the blade had been damaged, probably from when he had struck poorly during that practice bout. I apologize for this shameful display. Climb was so embarrassed that he wanted to crawl into a hole in the ground. Climb knew that his skills needed further refinement, so he had gone to almost neurotic lengths to care for his weapons, in order to improve his chances of victory. Or at least, he thought he had, until now. I see. I think I have a handle on you now. For a warrior, his weapon is like a mirror which reflects his personality. You are a very admirable man. The tips of Climb's ears were still burning as he raised his head to look at the old man. He saw a benign smile, gentle and full of grace. I understand. Then, I shall try to train you a little. However, just as Climb was about to offer his thanks, the old man interrupted him and continued speaking. I have a matter I would like to consult you about. You said you were a soldier, am I correct? Well, several days ago, I rescued a girl. After listening to the old man's, Sebas, story, he was livid with rage. He could not hide his displeasure at the fact that Renner's slave manumission laws had been misused in such a way, and that things had not changed until now. No, that's not right. Climb shook his head. The kingdom's laws forbade trading in slaves. That said, it was a common sight for people to be forced to work in poor conditions in order to pay their debts. Loopholes like those were everywhere. In fact, it was because of them that the law against slavery had been passed. Renner's laws were useless. That chilling thought swept through his mind for a moment, however. He soon chased that thought away. Right now, he had to think about Sebas' situation. Climb furrowed his brow. Sebas was in a very bad position. Perhaps if they could investigate the girl's contract, they could turn it against them, but Climb did not think the opposition would not have prepared for that eventuality. If this matter went to the courts, Sebas would lose for sure. His adversaries had probably not filed a suit, because they felt they could soak him for more money this way. Do you know of any righteous individuals who could aid me in this matter? Climb only knew one such person, his mistress. He could say with all confidence that no noble was more upright and trustworthy than her. Of course, he could not introduce Renner to him. Given that these people could go to those lengths, they must surely have far-reaching connections within the halls of power. Any nobles involved with them were sure to be movers and shakers. If the princess, who was affiliated with the royal faction, attempted to investigate or send aid and thus damaged a member of the noble faction, it might well spark all-out war between both sides. The use of power was a tricky business, especially in a divided country like the kingdom. Civil war was a very real consequence of handling the situation poorly. He could not make Renner do something that would tear the country apart. That was the conclusion he had reached while talking to Locuse and the others. That was why Climb had said nothing, no, could not say anything. I see, Sebas said quietly. There was no telling how he had managed to pick up on Climb's inner turmoil, but those words had a palpable impact on Climb. According to her, there were several others there, both men and women. How could this be? There ought to be only one brothel run by the slavery division. Is there another? Or, is that place the brothel we were talking about earlier? Perhaps we could think of a way to free them. I have to ask my liege first, but given that my liege controls a domain, if we could let those people escape there, can you do it? Does that mean she could take shelter there too? Forgive me, Sebas-sama. I will need to clear that with my liege as well. However, my liege is big-hearted. I don't think there'll be a problem. Oh, Your liege must be an amazing person if you hold them in such high regard. Climb nodded deeply in response to Sebas. Indeed, there was no greater mistress than Renner. Let's move on to another topic. What would happen if there was evidence that this brothel violated the law? For instance, if they were proven to be involved in the slave trade. Would this evidence be destroyed as well? The possibility does exist, but once the relevant information is taken to the proper authorities, I hope the kingdom has not decayed to that extent yet. I understand. Then, another question, if you please. Why do you want to become stronger? Climb squeaked. That was only to be expected, given that this topic change was more drastic than the last. You just said that you wanted me to train you. I trust you, but I would also like to know why you wish to become stronger. Climb narrowed his eyes at Sebas' question. Why did he want to become stronger? Climb had been an abandoned child. He had not even seen